Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. My name is Brian Doyle and I'm here with my co-hosts Tim McNeil and Rob Rogers. Guys, I think we're on the beach today.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm
right?
not digging it, man. I'm not digging it because I am definitely not on the beach right now.
No.
No, this is one of those cool Northeast days that for some reason, after 70 degrees this weekend, is like 30 outside.
It just won't go away.
Brutal.
30 raw and miserable.
Brutal. Yeah.
But, we can't say.
If it's any consolation, it snowed last night in Hawaii, up on the mountains.
Yeah.
On the
the beautiful white caps on top of the mountains. Go ahead. Just go ahead. Say more.
Yeah. I saw the live stream this morning on the news and they, it was because I was watching the news we were thunderstorms and rain, which is normal this time of year. And right at the end, they always sort of do the winter weather advisory. And you always go, I have to pay attention to that. And it's, it's always a summit of Mauna Kea. So,
yeah.
So that voice you guys are hearing there that doesn't sound like one of ours is our guest for today. And that is Derek Gabriel. And he's with Ignite. And we are excited to have him on. Derek's been a long-term customer now with DCIO Toolbox, but he had an opportunity to at least meet and greet with Rob and Tim when we were at the Rob and Robbins event.
Funny guy.
And they got to hear a little bit about, how cool it is to live in Hawaii. So, maybe we start out, Derek, with a little bit of a backstory on how one finds himself, if I recall correctly, from the Midwest.
Yes.
And finds their
born
way
in North Dakota.
North Dakota to the North Shore,
so to
Hawaii. Speak, right?
Wait till you hear this, Tim.
Yeah. So why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I was born technically in Fargo, grew up in Bismarck, and no wood chipper jokes. And sort of up and down the Midwest as I grew up. My father got transferred at one point. We were in Colorado briefly and then back to North Dakota. And then I moved to Kansas as a young adult and pretended to go to school a little bit in Manhattan, Kansas State area. And, I kind of rode the .com a little bit there and decided to look for new opportunities and was actually interviewing for a couple of jobs. And I was thinking about this the other day and it hit me. And I'd actually turned down a second interview at ConAgra in Greeley, Colorado to fly to Hawaii. And I'm quite certain that was a really good decision at the time. That was 2002. And my goal at that point was, get as far away from the Midwest as possible, but still live in the United States. And I had a good friend that had gotten stationed in Hawaii in the Army. And he basically, would tell me every day how great it was. And I figured, I'm a young 20-year-old. I figured I got to try this. And what's the worst case scenario? I just move somewhere else. And it just so happened that when I vividly recall getting off the plane and, walking out into the Honolulu air, and it was like, whoa. It's like, so I found where I belonged in the world and it's worked out. So I'm very happy.
Very cool. Now, how long ago was that? How long have you been there?
That was 2002. So I've been here just going on 20 years. Yeah.
Nice. Damn.
So you just picked up and moved, and so you had $20 in your pocket, and you were going to go and change the world. Like, what happened?
I was lucky enough to have a work from home kind of job, 20 years ago, which was pretty amazing.
Wow.
I was working for a small family owned newspaper out of Manhattan, Kansas, and I was their director of digital media. And at the time, they published, it was really fun too. They published an evening newspaper, except Sunday was the only day that it was a morning edition, which meant I would, come home drunk from the bar on Saturday night and upload a few of the articles, just enough so that my boss would know, people wouldn't call and complain. And then I would have to go into the office to do the remainder of the work, hungover on Sunday morning. And the newspaper also owned another digital property. It's called the littleapple.com at the time. I'm not sure if it still exists, but that was that's sort of the Manhattan of the Midwest. They call themselves the Little Apple. And so we had free, it was like a Hotmail system and stuff like that. And, advertising revenue was really the name of the game, of course. And so I kept that job when I moved, and because I could do the vast majority of it. By the time I left Kansas, I sort of had like a little assistant who was like a kind of an intern, and ended up doing some of the physical stuff, and that I didn't need to. But I thought, great, this will be fun. I'll keep this job. But the problem was, when you're 3,000 miles away from someone you don't really like, I didn't have a fondness for my boss. They were very they were not tech forward. They were very, they ran a newspaper like a newspaper, of course, 20 years ago you had to. And so one day I'm just like, F you, I'm done. And then I was like, uh-oh, what am I going to do for work? But luckily I had a fair amount of savings. I wasn't just super dumb, but I did nothing for a number of months, and sort of just hung out by the pool, went to the beach, and spent my savings. And then finally I was like, oh, I need a job. And I said, I want the job with the least amount of responsibility. I'm pretty much over high tech. I'm pretty much over, stress. And I knew a friend of a friend, and he's like, hey, my coworker says go talk to her husband, at a Ford dealership in Honolulu, and go ask for him. And I did. I went in. Hi, I'm so and so, and I was dressed up not super nice, but like polo shirt, and so once upon a time someone always said dress for the job that you want or whatever when you do an interview. But anyway, he's like, you're hired. And I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, you showed up, like, congratulations, you have a job. And
you win.
Ringing endorsement for the dealership industry.
That's
you showed up and you've got pants on.
Yep. And they match,
and you're soberish.
Right. And what was weird is it was a job they created. So it was called a sales service support specialist. It's the craziest title ever. But so I ended up hiring 3 individuals, and our job was specifically to keep the people that bought a new car happy. The way I haven't been in the car dealerships industry lately, but the way Ford worked at the time is they would give their dealers what was called Blue Oval certification. And if you had that certification, you automatically got a discount on your invoices. And so it made you competitive in a market where there wasn't a lot of competition. So they were, throw money at the problem because they really needed to maintain that certification. So it was really interesting. It was a hybrid between keeping the promises of a bunch of greedy salespeople and introducing people that bought their car into the service department. So we weren't quite service advisors, we weren't quite salespeople. And then they got their certification after a couple of years, and they said, we're done spending money. You go be service advisors. And then we were regular service advisors. And a few years later, I ended up quitting. But what's really awesome about that's this piece of my story is I ended up working with a couple of really amazing gentlemen that ran that service department, and both were local folks that were born and raised in Hawaii, but had moved and worked during their career on the mainland. And so both of them sort of like brought me in, took me under their wing, kind of in Hawaii, be a hanai, which is equivalent of like adoption, and taught me the differences between all of the sort of the different ethnicities of folks, and how different people from different backgrounds operated. Because under normal circumstances, folks from the mainland, haoles, the white ones, come to Hawaii and are very motivated to it's the mainland style of life, right? Like you're only as good as your last deal. You got to move, and that is not the Hawaii way, and that'll get you to piss off a lot of people. And so through their teaching and grace, and I learned so much just about life in general, and it was really awesome. And I think that set me up for my ultimate long-term success in Hawaii. And so I definitely owe those folks. But I think had I probably not gone through that experience, I would have tried to hustle like a mainlander and burnt myself out of and burnt my welcome in Hawaii a long time ago.
So talk a little bit about the transition from, working at a car dealership and that. How did you find yourself as a guy who wanted a no stress job with the least amount of responsibility, find his way back into IT? because there's no responsibility required there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
an easy one.
No,
That's an
no
easy
accountability
one.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and what's really interesting is I had worked for a large printing company in Wichita prior, like sort of through that .com sort of period, and a lot of crazy stuff had happened there. They were owned by a company called Consolidated Graphics out of Houston, which was essentially a bunch of lawyers with money, and they bought troubled printing companies and then, you know, gave them capital and fixed their equipment. And they did a .com spinoff. They created a company called cgxmedia.com. I have no idea where they exist in the world today. Probably like everybody else, they're long gone. But I was originally hired as a network analyst and for Y2K, and they had, you know, crazy custom plant software that they wrote, and again, I got really lucky in my life working with folks that were just super passionate about what they did and just really great human beings. And the gentleman that had pretty much wrote that software from scratch was my boss. And so you know, I just put out computers. You know, we ordered computers from Dell. I installed them. I tested network equipment and, you know, made sure things were ready for Y2K. And then, you know, I remember there was a fun day where we turned off the old Novell server and, like, you know, crossed our fingers and hoped that everything would work.
Yeah.
And it did. Everything was fine. And then they're like, well, we hired all these technicians and you know, software folks to get through this transition. And the president of the local business didn't want to fire us. And so we had sort of a sit down with the sales folks, and they said, well, what can technology people do to help you sell more printing? And the idea was like, what, you know, customization and things of that. So we sort of, I believe our company at the time, we invented variable print, and essentially we had these giant Xerox printers. And at one point I got sent out to San Diego to become a certified Adobe PostScript programmer. Really awesome skill to have. I think there's like 100 people in the world that probably have that, but very specific to printing, right? And so basically we built software that would output PostScript documents to the printers. And so then there'd be like a web portal, and a customer could come in and, you know, for a Microsoft or somebody, it would match their corporate standards. And then they could say, okay, you're a new employee, go do an onboarding and hire business cards in an envelope and stationery, right? And Microsoft was comfortable knowing that those items would all match their corporate standards. So that's what we built that. And it was revolutionary at the time. It changed the you know, the period of proofing. When you get something printed, you had to always used to get physical proofs. Now, of course, everything that we know is digital, and that's sort of an era that we ushered in. So it was a lot of fun. It was really cutting edge stuff and pretty cool. But there was so much turmoil with that transition to a .com company, and we had these lawyers come in and tell us that they didn't like the programming language, and then I, being young and you know, not understanding that you have to talk to executives in a different way, I told them, well, that's moot. You know, it doesn't matter if you like the programming language or not. If we don't have better internet, nothing's going to work. And so they were like, fire that guy. And then the president was like, no, I'm not going to. And then I had this, the president's name was Mark Woodman, and they had the plant existed of 3 different buildings, and we were like relegated to this far back building, and they would page people, and the whole plant would hear it. And so if you ever they called it a 5 to 5 page. If you got paged 5 minutes to 5 to the president's office, you usually were going to get canned. And so I got my 5 to 5, and I had to walk through the shop, and everyone's like, ooh, you're in trouble, you know, that kind of thing. And it turned into like, it turned into this lecture / sort of like, we're going to support you. You know, you've got great ideas. You've been fantastic for the team. Do you want to stay or not? And I'm like, I need time to think about this. This is crazy. And essentially by the next Monday morning, I decided that I was going to just, you know, do something else. Wasn't sure what it would be. And I had this great boss, of course. And so when I'm leaving, he's shoving stuff in my box. He's like, oh, you're going to need a laptop. Here, take this. And he's like, you're going to need this book, you know, his PostScript language reference manual. I'll never forget it. The plurm. He's like, you're going to need this book. And so he sends me on my way, and I end up immediately, because, you know, market's hot, right, for software developers back then. I immediately get a consulting gig. I can't remember the name of the website. There was some website like similar to Upwork or whatever, where you put a profile and say I'm a freelancer, And I said, hey, I got PostScript knowledge. And right away I had some bank from New York that was trying to automate, the prospectus. When you get a prospectus for a security, it's got the graphs, the 5-year history, blah, blah, blah. That has to get approved by the FTC before they can actually put that in front of a customer. And that is similar to that proofing process with printing, right? A courier would run it over to their office. They'd get a stamp of approval or rejection, and then they'd go back. So they said, we want to automate this process. And I was like, I've done this before. And so I wrote them software that would take inputs from a website and then generate PDF prospectuses. And they're like, how much money do you want? And I was like, $100 an hour. And they're like, okay. And so here I am, in essentially 2001 in Manhattan, Kansas, earning $100 an hour, and they FedEx my check every Friday. So you can imagine what I did with myself. We made beer can pyramids. Like it was a good old time. So I did that. September 11th happens. That ended abruptly. Is really weird. But yeah, so like all the turmoil of those things, like .com and September 11th and working with people, and I was just like, yeah, I'm just kind of done with this. And I started looking for jobs, and I was getting rejected because I was overqualified. Cox Communications was rolling out cable internet, and I applied to be an installer. I just thought, oh, this will be fun. And they're like, no, you're going to quit and go to Kansas City in like 6 months. We don't want you. And I was like, no, and at one point I was working with a headhunter. I got paid like $50 to go to interviews in Kansas City. So I drive 2 hours to Kansas City. I interviewed at Sprint at one point, and it was it just sounded so horrible. Such a horrible job. It was a database administrator for reporting, and you basically ran SQL queries all day so they could generate reports for the executives. And I was like, stab me in the eye. Yeah. I don't want that job, but I'll take it. And I met the guy at the part. Thanks for the $50. So it was really interesting. Yeah. So that's why I ended up with wanting a job with the least amount of responsibility, because I was pretty much over it. Yeah. And I went from Ford. I was a Ford dealer, and then I ended up I thought, hey, a better brand, it'll be a better experience. So I jumped to a Mercedes dealership. And what I didn't understand is that most car dealerships are owned by individuals, like, they're franchises essentially, right? And so the folks that owned the Mercedes, they're never going to watch this. Screw them. They were horrible people. It was a family from Chicago. It was a junior running it, and he just was not a nice person to work for. And I lasted, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. Just barely to the end of my probation. I think it was maybe 3 months. But there was days where we had to wear a suit and tie. Well, not a suit, but shirt and tie and dress clothes, right? And things would happen like the kids that wash the car, because every car's got to get washed, right? Oh, you came in for oil change. Let me wash your car. And so we'd have to go up, be 3 PM on, October. Super hot in Honolulu. It's already 100% humidity, like a dog's breathing in your face. And now then you got with your tie, so you got to tuck your tie into your shirt so it doesn't get dirty, and then you got to wash a car. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? And so I went into my assistant manager one day, and I said, you know what? I'm done. I just mentally, I'm done. And I said, I'm going to give you my 2 weeks notice. And he was like, well, if you want to quit, just leave now. Like, give me your keys and your cell phone. And I packed up the proverbial box. And I'm walking down Kalakaua Avenue in beautiful Honolulu. It's November, and the wind, there's a light breeze. My tie is slapping me in the face. I'm standing at the intersection waiting for the light to change, and I think I'm going to call my friend in Kansas City. And I had a friend in Kansas City that had started back when it was application service provider, and so I assumed he would have some software development work for me. I'd done, a lot of software. And so I called him up. I said, hey, man, tell your clients you have a branch office in Honolulu and send me some work. And we came up with this cool title, Pacific Director. And somewhere I've actually got business cards. It's hilarious. But with like days, first calls like, hey, can you fix a printer? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's figure it out. So it ends up, I had no idea what I was getting into. The opportunity of, there's Starwood and, all of these hotel chains and, Nordstrom, Macy's, We wired all the Sears buildings right before they went bankrupt and closed them all. But yeah, like the outsourcing in Hawaii from a tech standpoint for infrastructure was huge, and it still is. There's plenty of good money to be made for people that are okay just turning a screwdriver. But the problem that I had mentally coming into that was, I hate waste, right? Like, and so we literally got paid, to fly. Like one day we're sitting on an associate, I ended up hiring a friend of mine, and we're over on Maui. We're at the Westin Ka'anapali. We're looking out at the ocean, eating our comped meal. The flight was paid, the car was rented for, plus we were getting our hourly wage and free lunch, right? And this is the best job in the world. But I couldn't mentally disconnect like myself from the fact of how much inefficiency and stuff that I was dealing with. So it was really hard for me to deal with it, where it's like, I'm getting paid to wait for 3 hours, but if you did this, there wouldn't have been 3 hours, right? Like I had a lot of that I dealt with. And so then we got ambitious, and we thought, maybe we could get one of these contracts directly and with one of these hotel chains, and it would, we could do things better. And so we made a partnership with a company that did call centers, and they ended up it was my first big business lesson. They cut us out of the deal at the very, very end.
No.
And I was like,
oh, seriously?
But yeah. And we did work with CompTIA and the way I get to the future here is that we had done so much specific infrastructure, routers, modems, Wi-Fi, that I would be doing business networking with friends, at chamber events and whatnot. And they'd be like, oh, we just did this cloud thing. We got this Microsoft business productivity thing. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great product. Why didn't you call us? Like, oh, we didn't know that you did that work. And so I was like, we have a brand problem now. And in 2014, I said, I'm done. I'm closing down the original business. And I met a gentleman that became my new business partner, and we started Ignite Solutions Group at that point, and we were a cloud solution provider. So partnered up at the Microsoft store. I started doing speaking engagements, and we were off to the races. And that's how we get to today. So there's the story.
It's a story of a well-traveled background.
Yeah,
that's right.
You have been around.
Different experiences along the way.
I told you it was great.
All this done in the beautiful sun and fun of Honolulu.
Yeah,
right.
Poor guy.
We spent a little time on the Kansas talk, but that was a long time ago. That's awesome, Derek.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've had sort of as a personal saying or whatever, if you will, mantra, I guess, is that a bad day in Hawaii is sometimes better than a good day elsewhere. And so there's a lot of days that I've had that are, classified as a pretty bad day, but then I get to look out the window, drive over the mountain and realize where I'm at. So it's relative.
Yeah. All balances out.
Wow.
That's awesome. Well, our backstory took most of our episode today, but I think it took us down a lot of different roads, and it's a great story of, just keep trying new things, right? The more you try, if you keep putting your best foot forward, it's going to walk you to where you're supposed to be in life, right? And that's really what I think most of us are trying to figure out. 52, and I'm still trying to figure out some days, what should I do when I grow up?
Fellas, we are coming up to the end of our time here. Derek, I want to thank you. And I also want to thank that background of yours. It's hopes and dreams on my part, looking at that. For anybody that's looking to get in touch with Derek, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with the podcast. And additionally, this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com or anywhere that you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So, fellas, Derek, I told you the story was going to be great. I appreciate you both. Derek, I appreciate you being on here, and we'll talk soon, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
All right, take care.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.